Let's rock and roll. Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Only barely.
Just a little bit. All right, welcome. We're going to hit up chapter number 8 tonight. Let's see, Don's here too. I didn't check Don in yet. Don Justice. I checked him down already. There we go.
Now we can start. Now we can start. Yeah.
Now we can start.
If the Dons are
Both Dons.
Yeah.
All Dons.
Don two.
We're going to be looking at chapter number 8 tonight. And why don't we start with a word of prayer and we'll dig into the word. Heavenly Father, God, we love you, God. We praise your name for who you are and just for opportunity to dig into your word and study it together. Lord, we just pray that your Spirit would once again come, be in our midst, speak and move, and God, help us understand all these things as much as you have for us, as much as your will is for us to understand, so that we might be motivated for further transformation in our lives, our Christian walks with you. Be glorified, God, in all things we pray. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, if you got your notes there on the podium, or if you're watching on the camera, you can get them online. And if you happen to miss a week or something, we're still recording and putting both the videos and the notes and the PowerPoint on the app and on the website, so you can kind of catch up or follow that way. So we're going to look at chapter 9, and that in our outline again is we're still in the tribulation period. So we're looking at tribulation timeline information kind of things. We had a little break, or what they call parentheses, last week between the 6th seal and the 7th seal. So now chapter 8 picks back up into the 7th seal, and then also begins the trumpet judgments. So we'll have the 7th seal and 4 trumpets this week, and then get the final trumpets in chapter 9 next week. So that's kind of the general overview. Did anybody go home and study out and determine their covenant or dispensational theology last week? Change sides or find out any... there's not sides. Everybody's on the same side, okay? Or anything else from last week, 144,000. I looked a little bit at the Dan thing. About that a little bit more, and it just kind of seems Old Testament speaks like, Dan kind of went off the tracks. And so, because Dan went off the tracks, in the book of Revelation, his name is substituted, his tribe is substituted, so better keep it on the straight and narrow. Maybe is the lesson. So, I don't have anything else that I found that was, something I could hang a hat on anyway, more than that from last week's study. So, Revelation 8, and we're going to look at verses 1 through 13, all the verses there, and the first 6 verses really talk about the 7th seal being opened again. It's seal judgments being broken open, and then trumpet judgments, and then bowl judgments. Is kind of how the tribulation judgments work themselves out. So, the 7th seal is here. We'll read these verses and then kind of break them down into parts for understanding what them out. Verse 1, when he opened the 7th seal, there was a silence in heaven for about half an hour. And I saw the 7 angels who stand before God, and to them were given 7 trumpets. And another angel, having a golden censer, came and stood at the altar, and he was given much incense, that he would offer it with the prayers of all the saints upon the golden altar which was before the throne. And the smoke of the incense with the prayers of the saints ascended before God in the angel's hand. Then the angel took the censer, filled it with the fire from the altar, threw it down to the earth, and there were noises, thunderings, lightnings, and an earthquake. So the 7 angels who had the 7 trumpets prepared themselves to sound. So the 7th seal is actually, as it's opened, it contains the 7 trumpets. So within the first 6, there's a judgment or judgments that are happening. The 7th seal itself is actually what contains the next 7. So the 7th seal has 7 within it, and they are the 7 trumpets. Anything hit you from those verses, just reading them?
Well, it's always interested me of the silence for about a half an hour.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's, what's that all about?
Yeah.
They opened it up, right, so they're seeing I guess maybe they can see what's coming, and it's like, oh my goodness.
Yeah, I think that's got to be part of it, is that it's opened, and therefore they know, they have that knowing or seeing or hearing of what's going to be pulled out. Almost like they know what the trumpets are going to enact, and that causes so much awe, wonder, maybe not fear. There's not going to be fear in heaven like that. But the response is interesting, because all the other scenes in heaven are loud. They're not quiet like this.
Basically instantaneous.
Yes, right. Praise just breaks forth. Thunderous praise, in fact. And then this opens, and there are thunderings that happen, but it's not on earth. Heaven is quiet. Yeah. So I think it's a response to the severity of judgment upon those who will be on the earth receiving the judgment. So it starts with, this is on your notes, your handout there, he. Oh, I left my Bible. Where's my son? Layton, are you here? Will you run to my office and grab my Bible off my desk? It's like, I'll just look in my Bible and see that I left it in my office. It starts with he. Who's the he?
Jesus?
Seems to make sense, because if we're looking at, if we look back, again, that's where we've got to kind of know where we've been, what's been happening, and there was this weeping that happened because there was nobody. It seemed like nobody was there able to open the scrolls, except there is one. There's only one who has the authority to do so. So the Lamb is the one opening the seals on the scroll. Chapter 7 breaks between the 6th seal and 7th seal. And this results in a great earthquake and the opening of the 7th seal. It's kind of interesting. I haven't counted them up, but it would be interesting to count up how many earthquakes are described within Revelation at different occurrences. Again, how long is this time period? Well, tribulation, generally, most people would agree, is split up between 2 to 3.5 year periods. So within 7 years, you've got a lot of things happening, and some of them in the last 3.5 years in pretty quick succession, frankly. So there's a lot of earthquakes going on. And it does say that those natural disasters and occurrences seem to increase as we even get closer to that. So I always wonder and think about that. I thought about it a lot when I lived in Alaska, and there were lots of earthquakes all the time. But these earthquakes that are described seem to be maybe not global in magnitude, but bigger than just your 3.2s or 4.5s in Alaska that just shake the walls a little bit. So the Lamb, he opens the 7th seal in heaven, and that silence goes on. The 7th seal, it's the 7th sealed scroll, which has the titles of the earth, and so it's kind of like that pop back sealed thing. Those seals are broken open on this scroll, and the scroll unrolls, and the judgments come out of that. The 7th seal is the final seal. In the 7th seal are 7 trumpets, and under the 7th trumpet will be the 7 bowls. So they're all connected that way. So So the seventh one of each of these contains the next one into the bowl judgments. This silence you were talking about there, Don, half an hour, silence warns of a storm that's about to hit the earth, right? The destruction in the first 6 seals kills a quarter of the earth's population. And yet, there's so much more death, destruction to take place. That to think about that is just kind of crazy. I think we did the math a couple of weeks, maybe more than a couple of weeks ago now, but if we took a quarter of what's the Earth's population now?
Yeah,
It's like 6 billion, isn't it? Closely on 6 billion.
say 8 billion, make it easier.
Yeah, right? You take a quarter of that, gone, dead. And that's, they're going to be much more horrific in scope as we move forward from that. So that's sort of, I think, the response is, okay, this severe judgments have already taken place, and it's becoming worse. It's just kind of a jaw-dropping sort of thing. And that's those who are in heaven, where this silence is. The 7 angels that are described here, verse 2, I saw the 7 angels who stand before God, 7 trumpets are given to them. So these 7 angels are again these are like announcing angels. Trumpets and angels, those are always often connected. The sounding of a trumpet is representing the announcing of. I always wonder, does the earth hear the trumpet? Anybody have any thoughts on that? I mean, many things they now see that humanity's never seen, like the sky breaking open. What does that even mean? And it seems like many of these things are physical realities, audible realities. I've kind of wondered, are the people on earth, before whatever comes from the trumpet, do they hear the trumpet blast? And then they're like, oh, okay, what's going to happen? What do you think? Any thoughts on that?
I'm still working through trying to understand why everything's happening the way it is.
Yeah.
Right now, I'm kind of sitting at it that this is like a parable for some to understand and some not to understand.
Yeah.
And that maybe during these end times, those that are becoming spiritually enlightened will understand and turn.
Right.
And then those that aren't spiritually enlightened will still be just as lost and confused and messed up.
And yet, we know when it will become enlightened and found, saved. Yet we know that, the many who won't, they'll openly reject. It speaks about that. So it's almost like they're enlightened and they still reject God. Like they know who the judgment is coming from at some point, some of them. Though there is a mass confusion, especially at the beginning, I would think. But if it continues like this, it's like, okay, now I know where this is coming from heaven, and I don't care. That kind of attitude.
This is delineating then? This is drawing the line in the sand then? Is that why all this is taking place? So that those who will believe, and those who won't, and there's no, it's just one or the other? You think that's why all this? Because why doesn't God just come and say, there's my people, there's not my people, and be done with it, instead of all of this?
Yeah.
I think it's progressive, right? In the sense that God is going to continue to reveal His power, and there will be a few that will give in and ask for forgiveness right up until the very end. So I would see this as mercy, because I'm just going to use that word.
Yeah.
It's a continuation of His mercy. Look, you don't believe that. Here's one more. Here's another one. Here's another one. But guess what? We're going to get to the end of this road. And then
So
chances are gone.
everything we've seen from God from the beginning, His justice and His mercy, His justice and His love, can't be separated. So He's enacting justice. The judgment is absolutely justice for sin, sinful humanity gone to full wickedness, yet still within that mercy to the end. Yeah. So, in the notes here, 7 angels standing in the presence of God at his throne, waiting the command. One of them to be Gabriel. Here's how we could say that we would know that one of them is Gabriel. Gabriel tells Zacharias, the priest, that he had a son named John. Gabriel was also dispatched from the throne to give thee understanding, time of the death of Messiah that would precede Messiah's return. Gabriel and 6 other angels herald the coming judgments on earth. So there's a number of references pointing towards Gabriel being not just in the know, but in the present, in this time. We know he's present, but that he would be one of these trumpeting angels. Which one? Well, it actually doesn't say, it just says 7 angels. So this is what theologians who look at this and look at what some of the Old Testaments point to in Daniel, in Luke chapter 1, about Gabriel being one of these trumpeting, heralding angels. I don't know that we could say with any real strong certainty, but it leans towards that understanding. I think because of the very few who are actually named, it seems to put forward their prominence, their importance. So I think Gabriel and Michael and the archangels are going to be very, very involved at the tip of the spear in much of what's happening in the end time. Of course, Christ himself, the very tip of the spear of judgment. But as far as angelic interaction and stuff that's happening, it's interesting how much the angels are involved in all of this. Because in my life, and even in, if you're a student of history, it's not that angels aren't involved, but they don't have this kind of active known involvement as it is here. That's, I think, partly too, you have more of the supernatural revealed even in this time. But these angels are doing this work. And maybe even people on earth are not seeing them. John's seeing them. He's seeing them from heaven, and they're doing these things. So there's kind of just some of that to work through. But the angelic involvement is quite a lot in this time. So you've got the 7 angels. They're given 7 trumpets, and the trumpets seem to be with purpose to draw attention. So people will take notice, though what happens, you can't not notice when the trumpets actually, what the resulting judgments that happen. It's not like you wouldn't notice, but in the book of Exodus, chapter 19, the trumpet is proclaiming God's presence to Israel. Trumpet used to call out the saints for the rapture, if you're a preacher rapture kind of person. 1 Thessalonians 4:16. You might see that onto that. It seems that a trumpet, no matter when rapture is involved in that calling up of the saints. Here the 7 trumpets are given to the angels to proclaim, to announce the judgments of God. So, they have all kinds of purpose.
Yes.
Yes?
You had asked earlier, respectfully earlier, as to whether or not these 7 trumpets are heard. And I was thinking, you just read that the trumpet's going to sound and those that are in Christ are going to be caught up. So if that was heard on earth, why wouldn't the other? I mean, it's just a comment.
Right.
Question. Why would the other?
That's kind of the conjecture. It seems to fall in line with that to make sense. It kind of makes sense to me that these trumpets are audibly heard by the physical ears. The believers hear the trumpet at the rapture. Does all of earth hear the trumpet though? That's kind of maybe a question mark about it. Who has the ears to hear these trumpets? These trumpets are trumpets not of calling God. These are trumpets of judgment. Well, who is it for? Anybody on earth. Well, that makes sense, then they would hear them. I don't know. It's not real clear whether or not they're heard audibly that way. But
So if trumpets are not heard, and all that's visible and seen is the calamity that's happening in each of these judgments.
Yeah.
And we've speculated about that being God's mercy and His justice.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess I would throw in there that God is showing His consistency with, call it free will, call it our ability to choose, right?
Yeah.
And so that would be consistent with even in these last times, people still have the opportunity to decide to accept Christ or not to accept Christ, right?
Right.
So I guess it may be just circular discussion as to whether or not the trumpets being heard is
Yeah.
important. We'll certainly see what's going on.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. The result is devastational, but the purpose still seems redemptive. Yeah.
So if I do my math right, we have 21 catastrophic events over 7 years.
Right. And some of them are multifaceted. So there's even more than 21, because some of those that are listed say there's multiple things that happen.
So every 3 months, if it were millennial, every 3 months there would be another catastrophic event.
Yeah, right, that's true. Every 3 months, a global catastrophic event. There's just no recovery, is really where, and I can't imagine, that kind of continual occurrence. It's not getting better. Right now, if something bad happens, we expect, but kind of know it's going to be better after, or it'll be okay. It's not going to be okay. This is it. This is the end. The world will be no more at the end of this. So, yeah. And yet, humanity can know that. That's the thing. This hasn't happened yet. As it's happening, you could find the answer and know what's happening here, even. And that's what's even, in my mind, more crazy, that you would be able to find to know what's happening when it's beginning and still reject God. It's just crazy to me, but that's sinful humanity. Continues here, verse 3, another angel came and stood there, so we got 7. We got another one who comes with a golden censer at the altar. So this is kind of a point of debate among scholars. Who is this angel? Seems to intercede with the prayers of the saints. Some would say, would have to be Jesus appearing as an angel, interceding on behalf of saints. He's offering prayers on the golden altar. It's the function, seemingly, of a high priest. And so we know Jesus is really the ultimate high priest, though in the same scene, he's the Lamb, right, who's opening the seals, the only one who can open the seals. So it's kind of like, I don't know that makes total sense. It would be Jesus. He's doing others, and why wouldn't he use some of the other language that's already been used to identify Christ, not just another angel? So the 24 elders have 24 golden bowls with incense. This is the prayer of the saints. We've already covered that in chapter 5. This angel could be kind of administering, not doing the actual interceding itself. So there's kind of a little bit of a question, like, what's exactly happening, and what kind of authority does this angel need to have to carry out this function that he's doing? So the prayer of the saints is what is being offered up before the throne. I love that picture. That shows us the importance of prayer right now at this moment. That all the prayers of all the saints, I believe this is not just tribulation saints, though those that are there as well. I think prayers of the saints of all time are known by God, kept as an incense before Him, an offering, that He knows them, and our prayers in this sense are somewhat like they're eternally impactful, used, a blessing, offering of praise before God? I don't know. I think I would pray different a little bit if I really thought about prayers this way. Even as I pray over the food for dinner, to think about the depth, maybe even eternality of prayer this way.
I'm thinking, God reviews all those prayers one more time before he sends down that fire, right? That's the timing on it, isn't it not? It's almost like he's considering all this stuff again on how severe is going to be the judgment. Because maybe he's taken into consideration, again, all the prayers of the saints on, save this person, save this person. I don't know, just a thought.
Yeah. There's kind of two things here with this other angel who comes with the golden censer. He is given incense, and that's offered up on the altar, and then the censer that he's got is filled with fire. So the censer, at first you're like, is the censer got the prayers in it? It's not. The censer is the form of judgment, the thing that's used to cast it down to the earth. And so there's kind of two, both an offering of praise and an exacting of judgment coming, sort of all in the same thing that's happening. So it's always a very multifaceted, deep, there's so much happening, it's hard to even get a grasp on it, all happening here kind of in quick succession, or a big picture. So the censer here, some would see it as holding the fire combined with incense. The fragrance of the smoke ascends upward, the fire ascends downward. The priestly office, like I mentioned, of the Old Testament to the high priest, worship going towards heaven and judgment going towards earth. I think it's really the big picture, the details of that. Praise up, judgment down. It's really the big picture of that. Okay. The altar of incense before the Holy of Holies is a picture of the original located in heaven. So the altar is before the throne. We've talked about, I think Rebecca mentioned something about it, the prayers of the tribulation saints being under the altar, right? But there's this altar before the throne that's in this picture as well. It's a part of the Old Testament picture of the temple as well, and the Holy of Holies. So you've got all the pieces there representing and all that's happening before. I think again, it's pointing to the one who's accomplishing it all. You don't have to have the old system anymore, because the Lamb who's there, and the only one who's able to do all of this, has accomplished it. It is being accomplished right then and there. So many of the prayers of the saints, that's the question, is the saints just the tribulation saints? What I love too is, again, the picture of even just the tribulation saints. We saw a picture of really innumerable, uncountable mass of humanity who are believers, who only died in the tribulation. That's not all the others. So we know that's how big and merciful God is during the tribulation, is that many from just that time. Yet, well, if you take 6 billion, how many of us are Christians? Well, more will become Christians as they're enlightened. And so there's this myriad of humanity who will find their way into eternity in heaven from the tribulation. That's not judgment, that's grace. That's the real picture. Okay, and then the last thing there, it's kind of the shift, right, from praise to judgment. Fire from the altar now is the answer to all the persecution from the saints, all the prayers from those who've endured things. Now here's recompense. When the Bible talks about you not trying to repay as the Lord will repay on your behalf. This is the full repayment that God makes in justice, his judgment. Questions on kind of the opening of the seal there? It's verses 1 through 6. Okay, he breaks into the trumpets, verses 7 through 13. So we'll just kind of take those trumpets one at a time. And each trumpet enacts a number of things. The trumpet has a judgment, and then there's a number of results from those judgments kind of listed. And if you're a real mathematician, you can start kind of adding up some things like, whoa, what kind of earth is left after these things? When you start compounding them, it's insane. The first trumpet is verse 7. First angel sounded, and hail and fire followed, mingled with blood, and they were thrown down to the earth, and a third of the trees were burned up, and all green grass was burned up. So, hail, fire, mingled with blood, that's what's thrown to the earth. And the result, a third of the trees and all green grass. Okay, well, a third of trees. What are trees good for? Oxygen. Let alone life to other things. Lumber, there's actually a complexity to it. My dad's a forester, so I learned a lot about trees and how important they were, how important it is to manage them, not just let them overgrow. In fact, it's better to manage them well. But if you lose mass sections of forest, it has a third of trees globally are burned up with this. And then, even that seems intense. The next one, if you think about it, there's no green grass left in the entire world. All green grass burned up. The whole 100%. Whoa. Okay, so what is this hail, fire, and blood? The first trumpet is against the earth, though the results would be also against humanity. They would impact humanity, but the judgments are against the physical earth. Hail, fire, blood. It could be space matter, asteroids hitting the earth. Kind of seems to make sense, So any form of space matter impacting shower hitting the earth, and they come and they enter the Earth's atmosphere, they're on fire, they're burning, and so that burning causes the burning of the trees. I don't know if it's big ones or little ones. In my mind, it's a whole bunch of little in order to do what results. Another option is maybe volcanic earthquakes and volcanoes. Can be part of the geophysical earthquake. And the sixth seal could very well put into motion the events that showered the earth with hot debris. So you have a large earthquake, maybe set off by a volcano eruption. If you've been anywhere in the vicinities, or even not very close to the vicinities, the impact that both, but especially a volcano, can have very big area is pretty amazing. Hot debris setting. Now, a third of the earth is quite. Does it set off multiple volcanoes? Is it global, things coming from space hitting the earth? It doesn't really say. It just says hail, fire, and blood. Is it real blood? The fire is certainly real because it sets everything on fire. Hail. That's weird. Doesn't hail come in like rainstorms and put out fire? Sort of an interesting mix, right? But this is a mixture that we can maybe have a former picture of. Can anybody think of where that mixture has been seen before?
Egypt.
Right? The plagues of Egypt give us a lot of foresight into end times things. Sodom and Gomorrah, right? They were destroyed with fireballs from heaven. And so there's sort of like some precursor pictures to this, that, okay, it's a catastrophic event, what it does. Okay, so that's trumpet 1. Questions on trumpet 1? Or thoughts? I don't want to be trumpet 1. And we're nowhere, I can't imagine what that kind of impact. That's one trumpet. Second trumpet sounds something like a great mountain burning with fire. Okay, this seems to have a real clear picture, right? A great mountain burning with fire is cast into the sea. A third of the sea becomes blood. A third of the living creatures in the sea die. And a third of the ships were destroyed. Whoa. One big thing, global impact of a third of living creatures in the sea, a third of ships, and a third of the sea becomes blood, as in unusable. What's a great mountain cast into the sea? That sounds like an asteroid hitting the Earth, right? That's kind of the picture in mind, a tsunami that would result in something like that. You only see in movies, right? That's almost what, Revelation would make a great movie because of the things that they're seeing are really unbelievable. Things that are happening. So the thing John describes, he's just describing the thing that he sees. A meteorite, an asteroid crashing in the sea. Scientists today would explain the disappearance of dinosaurs as a result of huge meteorites striking the Earth, resulting in the death of vegetation, 75% of life, that kind of thing. Do we really know? I don't really know what killed all the dinosaurs. I always thought the flood. Any real deep scientists? Well, you're a science major or something, right?
Or something.
Hundreds of millions of years ago, what happened? No. This just kind of sees, again, you can kind of project some of these things. What will happen if a thing as big as a mountain, falls from the sky and hits the sea, and then the result is seen in the toll it takes. Not just on living creatures, now it's impacting mankind with the ships, but how much of mankind is affected by life that lives in the sea? Major. Like where we lived in Homer, Alaska, from May through September, there were no men in the town. It's the weirdest thing. About Memorial Day through Labor Day, all the men got on boats and went commercial salmon fishing. It's everyone. If you saw a male between the age of about 15 to 80 in the summer, they're probably a tourist. It's the weirdest thing, but it was livelihood. It was everything. You could go, they would fish for like 90 or 100 days, and the rest of the year they don't work. Or they could work if they wanted to do something else for fun. But they could make their living in that 100 days. But everything was tied to those boats. And boats were life there. And so, huge impact here with the second trumpet. Lands in the sea, the meteorite, seeming meteorite lands in the sea. The sea here is talking about the Mediterranean Sea, the ocean. Where does it doesn't say. Sometimes the sea in Scripture, maybe even in Revelation, can describe the sea of humanity. But this seems to not be that, right, because of the results of sea life. And the ships, right? So the waters are affected there. That's trumpet 2. Trumpet 3. The third angel sounds, a great star fell from heaven, burning like a torch. Sounds familiar. This is a bad time to look up at the sky, because another one's coming. And say it's 3 months apart, right? I don't know, the trumpets are just sounding. Time is I'm not really sure exactly, but let's just break it up into the 7 years, say it's 3 months. if you have one of these things, and then 3 months later you look up at the sky and you know it's coming, I mean, oh, can't imagine. So, like Burning Torch Falls, a third of the rivers and the springs of water. The name of the star is Wormwood. Mark, its name is Wormwood. This is a bad star. Sorry, I recommended some Wormwood tea to my friend Mark when he was going through COVID, and it doesn't taste real good. It's a little bitter. A third of the waters become as wormwood. Oh, that's really bad. Many mighty men die from the water because it was made so bitter. So this is the sea. The last one seems to be obviously saltwater impact. This seems to be the freshwater impact. A third of the rivers, the springs, and of the waters. The waters is different than the seas. So this would be fresh water supply. A third of them are made undrinkable, unusable, like wormwood tea. So that you wouldn't even want to drink it. You wouldn't. No. So this great star, the words here, mega asteroid. If you kind of work out the Greek here, that's where sometimes, great, another Greek explanation, but sometimes Greek word explanation really brings on, we use this in English this way, it's clearly connected. Mega asteroid is clearly, but wasn't that what the last one was? Yes, it just impacted at a different location, right, or in a different way. So this great star is the drinking water. And so it could break up, causing it to impact, major different areas. I would say this is a problem for Michigan. Just think about the fresh water source in which we, compared to globally, have, right? If you put them all together, we're clearly the largest freshwater source in the world. There's one larger freshwater source than Lake Superior.
Baikal.
What's that?
Baikal.
Yes, Baikal. So maybe this breaks up and it's Baikal and the Great Lakes. I don't know. If you hit those two, you might have a third of fresh water.
One of the ways of looking at this is, remember there was a series of, was it Jupiter that it hit? Was it Saturn? I forget. Which one has the big red spot? A few, I don't know, years ago, 20 years ago now maybe, there was a series of strikes.
Okay.
And it was a big asteroid, or meteor, or whatever.
Yeah.
And it broke up as it got closer and closer, and then it was a series of hits. And so this is what this sounds like. It's a series of hits that just keep coming.
Right. Makes sense.
Some of, the first are just a little break up small particles that are faster shot out.
Right.
And then you get the big one, you get the mountain, and then you get the bright star.
Yeah.
Which is the main part of it.
Right? Yep. So Great Lakes, Amazon River, a number of major freshwater sources seem to be impacted by this. There's again a recurring theme numerically. You notice all these things: a third of, which is just leaving the space for more of it to be impacted later on. Here's the wormwood, also known as absinthe. If drunk in abundance, it can be like drinking poison. It's just so humorous because I've got some at home. They look at it and she tasted it and she's like, "This is the worst thing ever. Why would you want that?" It's wormwood in moderation is used medicinally, actually, and so.
So we're told.
So we're told. Drink that wormwood tea, you'll find out. Okay, that's the third trumpet. Fourth trumpet, verse 12. Then a fourth angel sounds. A third of the sun struck, a third of the moon, and a third of the stars. So that a third of them was darkened, a third of the day did not shine, likewise the night. So this is a judgment of darkness, really. And again, if you just think about the literal scientific impact of such an event. A third of the day is no longer day, it's dark. Not just night or the moon, it's blackness. And the third of the night, which is lit by the moon, is no longer lit by the moon, it's just black. You want to see chaos, enter complete darkness when there's supposed to be light. That's why, things like and it doesn't even plunge you into total darkness when you get solar eclipse or something. It's like, whoa, that is really freaky. There was one, when was it, 2019? It was a pretty big one. Depending on where you were in Cody, it was like kind of early night in the middle of the day. Depending on where you were, some people drove a few hours to get in the darkest spot they could in that or whatever, but that doesn't even hold a candle to what this is talking about. So a third of the sun. The three trumpets results here, all of the crazy things. This kind of makes sense with an impact like an asteroid might have, or a volcano going off would have. Mount St. Helens, when it blew, if you get a really big volcanic explosion, it blocks out the sun. It's dark from just a cloud of ash, right? So it could be that. Billowing smoke from the things that are entering the atmosphere. A number of things could be causing this darkness from blocking out light from the sun. But again, even that, we'll kind of just think about the logical impacts of when it's supposed to be light, instead a third of that light time is dark. You're talking crop impact, right? Food impact. Again, you wouldn't know this unless you went to Barrow, Alaska or something where it's dark for 3 months in a row. That messes with you in your human function. They have to get these little things, they put them on their desk, they call them happy lamps. They're actually, they're to get UV, because you need light. We need the light. If we don't, man, we start going crazy. That's going to happen with the fourth trumpet.
You may have said this before, but what's the time frame between each trumpet? Is it months, days?
It does not really reveal the time between these judgments. As John describes them, they seem to just happen back to back. So I don't know if we can really give them a time frame per se. The thought is, that in 7 years, the first 3.5 are not so bad. It's the last 3.5 are bad. So actually you can condense, it's not every 3 months, it's maybe a little less in the first 3.5 years. The last 3.5 years, these are just happening all the time. Once a week, kind of thing. Seemingly, if you start condensing, when you break those two in half and say most of it happens in the last 3.5 years. So verse 13 is sort of a follow-up to the blowing of the fourth trumpet. It says there, I looked, I heard an angel flying through the midst of heaven, saying with a loud voice, woe, 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 to the inhabitants of the earth. And that's not like, whoa, 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 happy song. This is, woe is you. This is bad, bad, bad to the inhabitants of the earth, because of the remaining blast of the trumpet, and of the three angels who are about to sound.
Well, it's interesting because I read 2 things today before coming here.
Okay?
And it was an eagle, not an angel, or what they said it was more like a vulture than an eagle. Instead of the angel flying through the air saying, whoa, whoa, whoa.
Interesting.
Yeah. Does anybody else have that? I think it was NIV.
There's in this commentary here, it says the ancient Greek words for angel and eagle are very close in spelling. Some ancient versions say that it is an eagle flying through the midst of heaven. So, probably,
Yeah. The consistency of what we've seen, if this is in heaven, we've seen and heard a number of announcements and things in heaven. They've all been angels, and so what's interesting is that this announcement is for heaven. This is an announcement isn't on earth. The angel hasn't, or eagle, they haven't gone down to earth to say, hey, it's going to get worse. They're telling heaven. That's kind of an interesting thing to just sort of note from this. He's saying it's going to get worse, more with them. It's kind of like a wailing. It's a mournful thing for heaven, because I think there is still that, for those who have gone on to heaven and I don't know what kind of knowledge and seeing and whatever down to earth they have, there seems to be some, there's sympathy, empathy towards those on earth. And I get that empathy because of what's just taking place. And because of the remaining blast, the woe, the wailings, because this ain't bad yet. It's getting worse. 3 more trumpets to go. So the inhabitants of earth is, again, who the crying out, wailing is for. Much more death, remaining blast. The first 3, or the first 4 are environmental catastrophes. The next 2 are God's judgments directly against mankind. So we see the earth impacted, which does impact man, but it isn't directly at mankind. The next 2 trumpets we'll see are directed right at mankind. And again, the last trumpet, the 7th trumpet, is actually what opens up the 7 bowls, or reveals, starts the next 7 judgments. So, there it is, 13 verses. Next week, chapter 9, 21 verses. It's the 5th and 6th trumpets, which is still actually part of the 7th seal, right? All the trumpets come out of the 7th seal, and all the bowls come out of the 7th trumpet. So actually, these are all related to, all the way back to the 7th seal. So that's why we keep the cool picture of the seal up there to remind us these are all sort of contained within that. Okay?
The second trumpet, you were talking in terms of that being a meteor falling into the sea. Just within the last couple of days, there was a volcano that exploded. Is it Tonga? Tonga.
Yes.
And I was reading some of that, some of the effects of that online this afternoon. Some hours after that volcano exploded in Tonga, they heard it in Alaska.
Yeah, it was like 18 hours later.
And they said that the shock wave went around the world twice and even affected the Caribbean, which is, different ocean.
Yep. I have a friend in Fairbanks, Alaska, pastor. He was a youth pastor. He's now a lead pastor in the church there. When I was there, he described it, and he said it was like sort of, like a sonic boom type of sound, like, did a big airplane just go by or something? It was that awful for them, that much later kind of thing. A number of our Alaskan friends were like, yeah, we heard it, but it was like the next day. That's when they heard it.
Well, the interesting thing that I took out of this was that, scientists are now, they've got all this data for an event that they've never had records of before, and it sounded kind of like the second trumpet, only on a smaller scale.
Yeah. Because that's one of the big concerns friends we had in Hawaii and in Alaska. They were concerned about the potential tsunami. They got there, everything, there's always big tsunami holes. There's big horns, and those will blow. It means get to higher ground. So anytime there's a potential for tsunami, you're going to hear the horns blasting. You got to go up, that sort of thing. They had the tsunami warnings go off, and everybody went up high, and nothing happened. It was, not that nothing happened, actually, major current stuff happened out in the ocean, which changed global currents and that kind of thing. So it did do that, it just didn't cause a major tsunami. A friend in Hawaii described a 2-foot tsunami, which isn't nothing, a 2-foot wall of water, but something like, we're singing these trumpets, it's going to be much more. I mean, I think there's results that aren't listed here from things that are being described. You know, like a tsunami that happens, you know, or some of those things falling from heaven and lighting things on fire. But I think if it's really going to burn down a third of the forests, it's going to have more impact than just trees burning down.
Right.
Yeah. So, John's trying to put into words a catastrophic global scene that just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. And then more and more and more life ending and more difficulty for those who remain living. If you survive these stages of things, you get into the bowl judgments. You know, a third of this people die, a third of that. It's like, who's left? And if they are, you know, what do you have left? Trees are gone, grass is gone, the sun's black, the mountains have crumbled, the continents have started to split apart, the sky ripped open. You know, it talks about people running to hide in caves and things. Yet people still, through it all, will find Jesus and will reject Jesus. Okay, there it is. We've got some scroll to fill in there. There are 4 trumpets, pictures, so 1 trumpet, each gets a picture over there, and the opening of the 7th seal of Noah. So there's actually 5. So we need some drawers. There's not actually that many of us. So that means everybody should stop by the table and draw something. Okay. Thanks for being here. Chapter number 9 next week. And that'll be into some more severe trumpets.
Have you heard of Tom Horn?
Tom
Horn. Yeah, he's into prophecy quite a bit. And he's a former pastor based out of Oklahoma.
Okay.
And he's written several books about different things. One of them is, one of the things that he's talked about recently in the past year or so is there's a big asteroid on its way. And it's supposed to come, NASA's claiming that it's not going to hit the Earth. And Tom thinks it's probably going to hit the Earth. April 13th, 2029.
2029.
And it's called Apophis, which is some Greek word for like destroyer or some, it's got some, connotations of that. So it's just interesting to, it's worth looking into. You can find them on YouTube.
Yeah.
Tom Horn, Apophis. Apophas, Apophis.
Yeah. I always think that those are kind of interesting things, yet I also always proceed with extreme caution if anybody puts a date to anything. Because it's the one thing that you see repeated is you can't know the day or the time, or we know the season, right? But
I mean, I understand, I agree with all that.
Yeah.
But what it is it's mathematically they can calculate when these things are going to come close to the Earth.
Right.
So that's why there's a date set. It's not because he's saying it's the end of the Earth.
Yeah.
He's just saying this is a candidate for what seems to be occurring in Revelation.
Right. There was a close one that blew by us. Was it in 2020 or?
Just one the other day.
Yeah, there was one that wasn't real far. I mean, comparatively, pretty close pass by on a pretty big one recently. That kind of thing. But it always gets your mind. To me, my mind always just runs right to this part of Revelation when a big asteroid kind of thing. It makes me think of that as well. I don't always trust what NASA says, but I mean, they think we went to the moon. So
Well, NASA has not denied that this thing.
NASA
has not denied that this thing is coming. They're just saying it's not going to hit the Earth.
Okay.
It's going to come close, but it's not going to hit the Earth. That's their calculation.
Yeah.
Yeah, their calculation, though, I forget the actual number, but the distance is like several light years. Is still considered in the cautious zone. It's weird, but when they break that limit, then they're close, but they're really not that close.
Yeah,
But they're potentially maybe a problem.
right, and how much can they move in path,
All that.
Yeah.
Break up and all that.
right? Sure gets you, quick, like, again, it just makes you think, right to Revelation 8 here, the big stones. I mean, that's what it makes me think of.
Yeah.
You know, and again, how much that makes me want to be a pre-trib rapture guy. I don't want to be here when that big rock hits the earth. Now, it doesn't mean that I would be, though at this point, we haven't gotten to the point where Satan is pursuing and killing Christians. Judgment is hitting the earth, right? Now, again, where's the time frame all actually fit? But as far as what we've read so far, Satan, his demonic host, the false prophet, all that, they haven't gone in full on against believers yet. So that kind of, that gets you thinking too. That's where those lenses kind of like, all right, flip on your pre-trib or your mid-trib or your post-trib lens, and some of those kind of things will make you think, okay, this is happening now, and this hasn't happened yet, and you dare to not be there. I don't want to be there when those big rocks hit the earth and all that happens. Anyway. Okay, we'll draw some pictures and see you back next week.